Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for a brand new episode of Skylanders Imaginators Versus here on the channel. Today, we're obviously going to be tackling Dragon Temple for the 8th episode of Skylanders Imaginators Versus, an episode that is coming right hot off the tail of an absolute failure of cosmic proportions, because we're talking even about the villains having both lost Pinata, lost time, as well from their failure at Creation Clash. For villains very rarely fail, but when they do it spectacularly. So let's see if they can approach some sort of comeback going into Dragon Temple, where Wolfgang is going to have to deal with a grand majority of what the level throws at you, because there is an elemental switch before the magic and air elemental areas of the level, that being for the undead element. And Wolfgang is also a bowslinger, having to face the bowslinger doomlander. So all the way from that undead section, Wolfgang from there is going to have to play through the entire level from that point. But that being said, already it seems as though the villains are catching up on all that time they lost over in the Golden Arcade, even with Ambush being able to dash. Chompy Mage entered the level slightly sooner than what Ambush did, so he's maintaining his forward momentum moving forward, as if he can actually push the block with any sort of success. And Ambush has now pushed the final block into place, so it seems as though combat is approaching both of these characters, and Ambush is getting rid of these enemies very, very quickly, but he has to be very cautious given how close ranged he is, and enemies, like the sheep, love to hit you not once, but 60 times, so long as they are close by, and having to gauge enemies up close and personal means that the sheep are very likely to hit Ambush. But luckily for him, he has his sword swings to deal with them quite quickly, so even as they get close to him, they are being defeated before they have any chance at hitting him. Whereas Chompy Mage is doing a much better job keeping his distance. When he needs to go in and deal damage, he has this dash attack, and then for his other attacks, he can stack damage up using his bazooka abilities. And his second ability has no cooldown and a huge amount of knockback. It is absolutely busted. He even has a charge ability, which I literally only just remembered about in that their second of the gameplay. So he's going to be using that to create like little pellets at the middle of the enemy crowds and push them all back all at once. Chompy Mage is efficient in combat, and the fact that he just simply does not get hit. You can see this right now. As soon as enemies get close by, he uses his secondary attack or his charge attack, and either way, it ensures that enemies are knocked back, and it keeps things neck and neck between the villains and the senseis here, because now the barbarians have spawned in, but Ambush's health is looking critical. One more hit by these barbarians, and he is as good as finished. Not that he deserved that first hit from a barbarian, because he was behind him, so you wouldn't expect that hitbox to connect, but you know, these are the sheep enemies. What more do you expect from them? But already Chompy Mage has grabbed the chest, and he's making his way towards the first split decision path of the Dragon Temple, right as Ambush has only just collected the chest, mind you, so now the senseis have a lot of catch up to do, but Ambush is able to dash very quickly onto those bounce pads right there. Now Spyro has himself a major long-ass monologue, which is definitely not my favourite part to the level. There are very few favourite parts I have of this level, because this level just doesn't represent a lot of my favourite stuff from Imaginators. Now the villains are going to go with the water pathway, because why not? It's not exactly like Graveclobber is any quicker than Tycoon Crow. Both of the villains are particularly slow, whereas the senseis are better off going with the fire, as Ambush dashes straight into it, because Flarewolf is a very efficient and speedy character, as he can dash straight through the stage. Graveclobber seems to be struggling with pushing these blocks. I don't know what it is with this level and the push block animations failing. I suppose it's all just a glitchy mess, but that's no surprise coming from one of the latter Skylanders games. This final trilogy seems to be a lot more glitchy than the original trilogy they made for Spyro's Adventure, Giants, and Swap Force trilogy, that is. Now, Flarewolf is already almost done with the water segment, whereas Graveclobber seems as though he's miles behind. In fact, now Flarewolf has already approached the bridge sequence, whereas Graveclobber continues pushing blocks into place. So now the villains are losing a lot of time, purely because they chose to experiment with taking the alternate path. This decision is really coming back to bite him thus far. But hey, at least Graveclub can do himself a favour and push back that bounce pad. But it's very difficult to actually see the arrows for where to push these blocks when the bounce pads are also the same colour as the directions in which you can push the block. The constant blues are rather irritating all around, but already Pit Boss is approaching the undead section of Dragon Temple, where the bounce pads don't seem to be working in his favour, and he has lost a lot of time to that. And due to the fact that Wolfgang is a much quicker villain, and he won't need to switch out when magic pops up because Painada was defeated in the previous episode, that means that the villains have the opportunity to make up for some lost time with the reliance on Wolfgang's dash attack and the fact that Pit Boss just wasted time with platforming segment. So if Wolfgang can come through things much more successfully, hopefully from the experience, because the Sensei has played through this level for the first time this time around, so with that knowledge in the back of his mind, perhaps Wolfgang cannot make the same platform mistakes. But Pit Boss has already collected all of the Imaginite chunks from the Imaginite chest. But speaking of not making that same mistake, Wolfgang is now making his way slowly but surely to the top. Unfortunately, you've got to be patient with these floating islands in the sky that apparently floating islands can be weighed down by blocks that apparently weigh much less than the Skylanders themselves. I mean, that makes sense. Massive blocks in real life weigh more than humans, generally speaking. But what doesn't make sense is the fact that a massive floating island in the sky can be weighed down in the first place. Then again, Skylanders does do one thing during development, and that is take all physics and realism and immediately throw it out the window. What we're not throwing out the window, however, is that their Imaginite chest, because the villains are going to need that. They got to keep up their lead with the Imaginite chest collected, because what I didn't realise in the previous episode is that the villains actually have the advantage. They are one Imaginite chest up at the moment. They're just down in terms of their cast, so they really need to get through this level relatively unscathed. It's almost a guarantee that Buckshot isn't going to be getting through this level alive, because even if he gets past this Battle Gong sequence, he still needs to defeat the Bowslinger Doomlander, which is a task easier said than done, especially for a character more on the weaker side like Buckshot himself. He doesn't quite have penetrating lasers that go through the pedestals unlike Robo. I really wish I could have had both Chain Reaction and Robo in this series. That would have been really cool, but obviously that was clearly asking for too much. I think it's already pushing it, turning Legendary Tri-Tip into a smasher, a light smasher of all things. But yeah, Wolfgang is absolutely stacking up this damage right now. You can clearly see who the more efficient Bowslinger is, because already Wolfgang, having been several seconds behind, has caught up to where Buckshot was in combat, because he's able to target these enemies and deal massive chunks of damage to literally everything in front of him all at once. His speakers can deal damage to one enemy whilst he uses his arrows for another. He got very lucky not to get hit by the swing of that Barbarian right now. But as you can tell, those speakers, even when the enemies are behind them, they're still taking damage to them. I suppose the hitbox for Wolfgang's speakers are as janky as the hitboxes for those Barbarians, but getting revenge on these freaking sheep hitboxes that I hate them. I hate them so much! But enough of peeking for Mike. It looks, well, it doesn't look like anything. It would seem as though Wolfgang has made it to the Gong battle. So let's be setting up some speakers. And once again, because there's two enemies and all of those directions are being hit all at once. And whenever an enemy gets close to Wolfgang, well, that was the enemy's first mistake, getting close to Wolfgang, because it means that he can use his charged up bow and strike down everything around him, knocking it back. But speaking of getting knocked back, the Sensei cast has been knocked down a peg, because Buckshot, to no one's surprise, has been taken out by none other than a bullshit hitbox. The attack that defeated him certainly shouldn't have landed. It wasn't even in the same universe, that hitbox, as Buckshot, and yet the game classified it as a hit anyway. Locally, this is what we have Airstrike for, who is not 4 times better than Buckshot. He is 4 times better than me and 4 times better than Buckshot. He's at least 16 times more powerful. He's definitely 16 times quicker, and you're going to see that the proof shall be incarnate, as the visuals are representing just how beastly Airstrike truly is. Just look at these combinations right now. He is toying with these enemies. They do not stand a chance, and he is making that clear. He's launched them in the air, and then he's obviously continuing with brawling combos and special combos to draw in enemies into those combos, so that now they cannot escape his grip. He's just constantly attacking them back and forth. But now, that being said, the villains, Wolfgang, representing them, is getting through this bridge puzzle very, very quickly, because once again, the senseis went for it first, and when Airstrike eventually gets around to that bridge puzzle, hopefully he won't have the same platforming issues as Wolfgang, but he's got to make sure he gets that pack of grapes, because he wants to go into this air section with as much health as possible. Which is also why the senseis bothered switching out for Airstrike, because that means that when they get to the air section, they won't need to switch to Airstrike once again. And it's not exactly like how much health Airstrike has left is going to be a hindrance. He's one food item away from being fully healed up again, because he just absolutely obliterated that Battle Gong, taking almost no hits in the process. Now, Wolfgang is defeating everything in sight, because he can, as we've already established, he can fire off arrows in one direction and have his speakers dealing damage in another, or he can triple up on the damage by having his speakers and arrows fired all in the exact same direction as one another. The Airstrike we're going to see with this bridge puzzle here, because the senseis went for it first, I completely forgot which bridge it was I needed to grab, and I wound up grabbing the wrong bridge, which means the Airstrike has to jump up, realize he has a wrong bridge, and then jump all the way back down again, put the wrong bridge back into place to pick up the correct bridge, and then hit the bounce pad once more. That is a time waste if I ever have seen it. But Wolfgang is doing nothing of the sort. He is absolutely obliterating enemies to no one's surprise. I mean, much like Airstrike, when compared to Buckshot, he is 4 times better than being 4 times better than Buckshot. 16 times better, that's a lot of walls. 4th wall break inside 4th wall break, as Deadpool would put it. Because what do you know? This is a YouTube video. I'm doing post-commentary for a YouTube video right now. Just had to go and break the 4th wall, didn't I? But now, Wolfgang is done with the air section, so he has a Battle Gong to reassemble, because they really had to reutilize the Supercharger's assets. In fact, this isn't just reutilizing the Supercharger's assets, this is reutilizing the exact same puzzle. They literally copy and pasted, but I couldn't blame them. You know, Superchargers, expensive game, a lot of money and resources went into that. Why the hell not reuse some of them? You know, save a little bit of cheddar. You never know where you might need that cheddar somewhere else in the development. But Airstrike is once again just absolutely toying with his enemies. He is outmaneuvering them, whilst also drawing them into a world of pain, whereas combinations don't give them any chance at hitting him. Any time the enemies think they have a chance at hitting him, Airstrike just kind of breaks their spirits by defeating them before they have the opportunity to do so, or being able to move out of the way because he's that quick. But speaking of being quick, Wolfgang is now tackling the Bowslinger Doomlander, and already he has reduced it by 1/8 of its health. Now, Wolfgang does have speakers which can be placed from behind a pedestal, so Wolfgang has the advantage of being able to hit the Doomlander whilst taking shelter behind those pedestals, and he is already on that second phase, whereas Airstrike still isn't done with these barbarians just yet, but he's got to take this slow and steady because he wants to go into that Bowslinger Doomlander with as much health as possible. Now that Buckshot was defeated midway through the level, it means that Airstrike now has to tackle the rest of the level in his place, because there is no longer a Bowslinger Sensei to take on the Bowslinger Doomlander. This challenge keeps on getting tougher and tougher for Senseis, especially now that the villains, if should Wolfgang get through this unscathed, have the potential of evening out the cast on each team, and Wolfgang has already got down to the final phase of a Bowslinger Doomlander, which is actually a major problem, because now it means that he has sheep to deal with, and we all know the awfulness of the sheep. These projectiles have absolutely rubbish hitboxes, and they slow you down, so you're vulnerable to all of the other attacks in the process. So now Wolfgang is going to have to be much more of an intense dodger. Like dodging earlier was child's play compared to this. It was so incredibly easy to do it earlier, or at least easier than this. And now Wolfgang is down to 28 health with still 1/8 of the Doomlander's health bar to deal with. This is going to be a tough conflict for Wolfgang, especially since these sheep are going to spawn in anytime now. And speaking of spawning in, Airstrike now has the Bowslinger Doomlander to have to deal with. Now, his secondary ability does actually reflect certain projectiles, so he might be able to use that to his advantage in this fight, but he's going into it with only 606 health. And given that he's a brawler, dealing melee damage to a projectile boss is a task easier said than done. So here goes Wolfgang having to take down all these sheep again. He's playing it slow and steady because he really needs to get through this unscathed in order to really hold all of the villains on his shoulders. Carry all the villains on his shoulders, I should say. But now, with all the sheep defeated, he can focus solely on the bowslinger and watch out for all of these attacks. Never mind! He obviously needs to race to the corner of the stage as fast as possible because those honing in arrows can still defeat him even after the Doomlander's defeat. But he avoids them and defeats the Doomlander with 28 health left. That means that the villains have got through this level without any lives having been lost. And since they have gained time on the senseis also, it means that the villains are looking real fine, and the episode hasn't even come to an end yet. We do not know of Airstrike's fate, only that he's made it so far to the second phase of the Bowslinger Doomlander, and this is where I figured out in the gameplay that Airstrike can reflect these projectiles, so what I should be doing is not worrying about reflecting projectiles, but just avoiding the projectiles altogether, because it doesn't always work. Like there, for example! Airstrike is a very temperamental character. He does what he pleases, when he pleases it, and that can involve reflecting projectiles, apparently. So yeah, now Airstrike not doing what I was expecting him to do and being fiercely inconsistent has led to the need for Tide Pool. There have been 2 Sensei defeats in the exact same level, so in a single level, Wolfgang has managed to bring the villains back to the same state as the Senseis, but with a timer and Imaginite chest advantage. Yeah, the villains are looking good with 4 more episodes remaining after this one, because this is going to be a series with a dozen episodes. That's just a nice, well-rounded number. So the villains are dealing with this long-ass cutscene, and unfortunately, for those of you who hate this cutscene, which is basically anyone with eyes and ears because it's such a terrible cutscene, we're going to have to watch it twice. Luckily, you get my voice instead of listening to it, and, you know, I'm not exactly going to toot my own horn here. My voice isn't exactly nothing glorious. But it's better than this cutscene. Not that it is difficult to be better than this cutscene, and it's not particularly high praise. But so long as Wolfgang doesn't take damage here, he will get through this level unscathed. And I am extra certain that there is no way of taking damage in this section. But then again, if there ever was a Skylanders player bad enough to take damage in a section where it is impossible to take damage, it is me. I'm sure I would possibly be so bad to find a way to take damage in this completely damageless area. You know, you could kill yourself with Ghost Roaster, for example. That's one way to take damage in a unique manner, to where Ghost Roaster is the only character capable of doing that. Not even High Five can do it to himself, because even though he takes damage from his slam attack, whenever you get to low enough health, he no longer does the slam attack to deal any damage to himself. Obviously, the developers learnt from Ghost Roaster, where his self-inflicting damage had to have a cap, so he could no longer do the ability when his health was too low to lose. But now Wolfgang has finished the level, whereas Tide Pool is in the exact same situation as Wolfgang was on the final phase with only 103 health to spare. And the sad part is that Tide Pool is the second Sensei here. Airstrike has already opened, well, he's loosened the jar. Now he's just waiting for Tide Pool to open it, and the last thing we need is a third Sensei defeat, being one to finally open up that pickle jar. I understand it's a very difficult pickle jar, especially when sheep enemies are involved, but still, this is excess right now. Losing Tide Pool as well is not an option, so Tide Pool is going to have to waste time on behalf of the Sensei's timer in order to, in other words, guarantee her safety. But here she goes. She's getting there slowly but surely, inking up the Doomlander. But the villain's timer is almost going to be coming to an end because, well, actually, it has come to an end as there is only one Imaginite chest to deal with in this level. All of the mini-games and stuff where you usually find yourself getting Imaginite chests, they're all down the brain path rather than the brawn path. But unfortunately, in Dragon Temple, both teams had to take the brawn path in order to defeat the Battle Gong. And defeating the Battle Gong as we're playing as Senseis for either of the teams is a necessity in order to get through the level at hand. It would be cheating otherwise, and we don't want no dirty, rotty, stinking cheaters up in here, because it's, as they say, cheaters never truly win, do they? So Tidepool, now at 11 health, right when you thought she couldn't take any more damage, she went on ahead, took some more damage anyway, and apparently she's still fine. She's barely hanging in there. But she really needs to hurry up and defeat this Doomlander, because even after this, she has the longest cutscene to deal with, and on top of that, she'll have the Imaginite chest to also open up from the vault, but it will only be the one chest, the same as Wolfgang, because the only chest to open is the one level star objective you get from this level. You can't complete the egg rescue minigame, you can't complete the troll radio, you can't complete the creation clash, because again, all of that is down the brain pathway, and we chose Brawn, which did result in Buckshot's death, unfortunately, but that's just because Buckshot is actually useless. So now that he's been taken out of the Sensei cast, I feel as though the Sensei cast has actually improved. I'm pretty sure Buckshot is the equivalent of -1 member. So now that we've taken care of that -1, you know, we have a -1 in the cast. It's basically a plus. So yeah, no longer dealing with Buckshot. It's not a heavy tragedy to me, but losing Airstrike on the other hand is awful, so much so that I'm going to peak my mic again. My apologies to headphone users right now, but you know what, I think headphone users deserve to suffer just as Airstrike has suffered. He is such a good character. He absolutely devastated all of the enemies at the Battle Gong. After that, if I were one of those enemies in a Battle Gong, I would feel sorry for myself, losing on that kind of scale to that absolute raw overpoweredness. There are few Skylanders with this much untamed power, but here we are with Airstrike having died to the stinking bow-slinger Doomlander after some of the best gameplay we've seen throughout the entirety of the series. Airstrike dealing with regular enemies, it was not even remotely close to a problemo for him, but dealing with the bow-slinger Doomlander on the other hand, that was tough. If the Brawler Doomlander was in this fight instead, then Airstrike, I guarantee, would have been just fine, because the Brawler Doomlander is very melee orientated, and Airstrike can very easily run away from melee moves, its projectile moves that he tends to struggle with. Now, locally, in my rambling about Airstrike, the cutscene has finally came to an end, so Tidepool can glide slowly but surely over to the other side, because that's exactly what the Senseis need, a slow and relaxing glide. Said no one ever. So Tidepool in aerial descent, where air is stronger here. If only Airstrike was still alive, then he could get the air buff. Not that it matters here, because as we've already established with Wolfgang, there are no enemies here, and therefore no way to take any extra damage. So luckily, Tidepool can remain with her 11 health. Man, what a massive chunk of health to be ending off a level with, I suppose. But it's very important that Tidepool survived, because this way she can tackle the quick shot Doomlander in the, well, it's technically the next level, the abandoned amusement park, but we do have some sort of intermission in between the two episodes where we have to collect some cake parts. If you guys think that collecting cake parts is suffering enough, just remember that in order to make this series, I had to play through the cake section twice in a row. Man, the things I do out of the goodness of my heart. So that being said, because we weren't going for all the collectibles, all of the areas, all of that would have been impossible to go for anyway, because Dragon Temple is a level that you have to play it twice, no matter what, in order to get triple stars, which is why we didn't bother going out of our way for any of the collectibles. We just wanted to get through this level as fast as possible, which for the Senseis, at first, it seemed relatively easy. You know, Ambush did lose a bit of time to the combat because Chompy just got through it a little bit more quickly, being more efficient in combat, but they gained time again when Graveclobber took his time with the water section, only to lose the time again when Buckshot took forever to not only defeat enemies, but also die. If he was going to die, I think he could have done it much more quickly. But that being said, Tidepool is going to open up the one Imaginite chest from the vault, and then we are going to stop their timer. I cannot, in good conscience, end off this video without first thanking all of my incredible channel members whose continued support help make these videos possible. Without them, these videos would be near impossible to make, so from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate every last one of them. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, there are plenty of options on screen now to explore, and please consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. On that note, this video is coming to an end, so thank you so much as always for watching. Until the next video arises, peace!